Karnois am Mizbach hat noch suchen.
Okay.
Karnois,
Ja.
steht Ramu Karnois. Steht in der Teure steht Karnois Huse, na wo. Ramu steht Karnois, na wo. Rasche sucht, da steht zweimal Karnois, na wo, und ein Karnois mit der Wohle. Nimmst du raus, es hat die Teure, kiek, es zu sehen. Dann was Rasche, ich habe noch gekriegt wegen Pfannen, wegen Sicker, dort Rahmen sein, wegen Sicker. Aber noch gekriegt dort in der Mauer Rahmen sein, in Karnois, die Drasche, zweimal steht Karnois, nein, der Mauer rettet wegen dem, als ein Matun war Chatos, gab mir den 4 Matun, das auch Karnois am Isbaia. Ist du bei Silber halt dafür dass wir ein Matun auf dem Bayer so auf die Arte ist der Gemur der ganze Masse weil statt Karnos ist der zweimal Karnos der Huse ist 2 in Karnos mit der Wurf ist Amula ist noch einmal 2 ist 4 ist 1 mit der Legifa der ganze Artikel so Rasche dort als Karnos einmal Karnos steht mit der Amula. Dus es nog een taal is nog geen lam zijn om het bij. Doe mitten de rasje doen. En dat is nog in de paasjes waar je kroon aan kan mis. Zijn er staat in die andere gemoeien staat Karel Nois onnawoe. Je zegt rasje genomen. Dus dat daar gersen als ze doen amulad. Dus.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, yes.
Thank you very much. Oh, mine.
If we learn to do, but
That's
one thing.
Nicht hart. Nicht hart, es ist gut Frieden.
No, dat is schlof niet.
Ja.
Nee. Dat is de afstand.
Hand te doen, een goede man waard jetzt.
Ja.
Hij is weer Spielwerk. Een goede man.
Ja.
Okay, so ich soll umfangen da. Zog der Gemude. Wir halten auf Test von Aleph. We are 5 lines at the bottom. Itmar. We have a machlokes. Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Haylacha shaloi beregel psula. Haylacha without actually moving your legs is possible. So we actually just had the Shaila. The Gemara tried to bring a rayas. The Gemara didn't have a raya. And the Gemara right at the bottom of Amud Beis said, Amar Ula Amar Berechanin, Haylacha Shaloi Beregel Loi Shema Haylacha. And now we're quoting the same halacha, but with a stronger lashon. That Haylacha Shaloi Beregel is psula. We did Haylacha without actually taking a step, it's psula. And if you look at Rashi and the Shita Chametza says pasla, it makes the carbon puzzle. So not only is it not kosher, but it will actually puzzle the carbon. Rashi goes pasla, vafilu asa koyin, even if a koyin did the halacha, and he did it without walking, just by pivoting and taking the dam from one side and passing it to the other side, the carbon will be puzzle. What about by psachim where we said one coin passed the blood to the other coin, they made a human chain. So to Rashi reminds us the Gemara said b'denaidi. That's speaking where each coin needs to take a small step. Alma, what do you see from here? Loi efsher l'tekuna. We had a shaila right at the top of the Amid. Can you do a redo? Can you rewind? The fact that Rabbi Yochanan used the lashon of pasla, it passes the carbon. That means you can't fix it. If it's just not a good halacha, so then redo it and make a good halacha. But the fact that Rabbi Yochanan here is quoted as saying pasla will indicate that you cannot fix this. Eisvei Rav Nachman Lula. Rav Nachman asked the kasha to Ula because Ula is the one who quoted Rabbi Yochanan that said pasla. It says in the Brayse as follows: Nishbach mina kli ala ritzpa. What if they made a proper kabbalah hadam and the dam was niskabel in the keli? Because if the dam falls straight to the floor and there was no kabbalah, that dam becomes puzzle. You cannot suck it up and put it back into a keli and have a kosher carbon. But what if you already made the mitzvah's Kabbalah and then it spilled out? V'asvai, and you gathered it back up. Kosher, that carbon will be kosher. And so the question over here is, you don't have over here a proper halacha, because here when it spilled, it sort of moved towards the mizbeach. So there was some halacha done that was done without a kohen actually taking a step towards that halacha. Yet itself is still kosher. Yeah, but we just quoted Rabbi Yochanan as saying is that you cannot have a redo. If a halacha was done not properly, that carbon is puzzled. That's the whole problem. So you cannot have a redo. Zok to Gemara, and Rashi actually bavorns what Tuvi's asking. Rashi is when he nami do amrit the tzarich lachziroi lachayo v'lachzir l'hoylech beregel mikal makoim b'takanta sagile. Yes, it says kosher. It doesn't mean kosher that counts as good halacha. It means you can do the halacha over again. Yet Rabbi Yochanan seems to say that it's possible and nonsense. Zok to Gemara hakam b'mayaskiran kishiyotzo l'chutz. The dam didn't roll on the floor towards the mizbeach, and therefore it would have been considered a possible halacha. There was never a halacha done at all because the dam happened to have flowed in the opposite direction. Correct the Gemara, when you drop a liquid on the floor, lebaroi nofik, legavoy loy ayel, are you telling me that dam will only spread in one direction? That's not logical. The dam would have spread in all directions. So the part that spread in the direction towards the mizbeach, a halacha was done on it, and all the dam should be possible according to Rabbi Yochanan's psak. Zok to Gemara, you know why it wasn't a problem? Is b'makom medron. The dam fell in a place where there was an incline, where the floor wasn't perfectly straight. It was leaning away from the mizbeach, and therefore no dam moved towards the mizbeach. There was no halacha, the dam only moved aside. Or ibayisema beguma. Maybe right where the dam was dropped, there was a little bit of a depression in the ground, and the dam got captured in there. So again, it didn't move at all towards the mizbeach. Ibayisema b'smicha. Rashi's b'smicha means that the dam was like half congealed. It was like very gelled already, and therefore it actually didn't roll. It just blopped. It fell down on the floor like a blob. Gemara, are you telling me that the whole purpose of this brisa that we quoted that says nishbach menachli ala ritzba v'asa kosher is in one of these three unusual cases? Ve'ich bil tana lashminon kol hani. You're telling me the Tana would not have his way to say a halacha about dam that would have only went in one direction, about dam that would have fallen on the floor and didn't move towards the mizbeach? That's terribly illogical. Ba'id, I'll bring you another raya that your pshat is wrong, because at the Tani be'idich perkin, I believe in the third parak, the brisa says, or the Mishnah says, the following: Nishbach ala ritzba. What if dam was never niskabel in a keli? Rather, it went straight from the neck of the animal onto the floor. The osvai, and you gathered it up. Puzzle. That dam will be puzzle because there was no kabbalah made. For the Gemara, why did the Tana have to go so far to find a case of nishbach adam that was puzzle to a case where it was nifsal before it was ever niskabel in the keli? According to Rabbi Yochanan, we have a much closer case that would be possible. Live like Vididay, talk about even dam that was niskabel in the keli, and say as follows: where do we say that the dam that fell on the ground will still be kosher to be used? Is kishiyot salachutz, only if the dam only ran in the direction that was away from the mizbeach, and therefore it has no shaykhis to any type of halacha psula. Avol niknas lefnim, but if the blood went in the natural direction, which should have been even towards the mizbeach, possible will be possible, even if there was already a kabbalah's dam done on this dam. So to Gemara, you're right, tiyufta. In fact, we're going to have to say that even if the blood went in all directions, the Brisa says nishbach min aklil ritzvah basay kosher is even if it went in all directions, even if it went towards the mizbeach, meaning that a halacha shaloi beregel will not passel. Yes, you require a do-over, but it will not passel. So that is an upshot on what we just quoted, what Ula just quoted in the name of Avoda. Zok tehelige Gemara weiter. Itmar halacha shaloi beregel. This very same shaila machloikis Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan. The Gemara wants to suggest that this will be totally in the machloikis Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan. Who is Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan? Remember, Rab Shimon said that halacha. Rab Shimon said that the halacha is not really a valid avoda because sometimes it doesn't have to be done at all if the shechita was done right near the mizbeach. So that's the Rab Shimon and the Rabbanan that we're familiar with, but that's not quite what the Gemara is going to say. So let's have a little peek in Rashi towards the bottom of the skinny lines. I think 2 lines up from the skinny lines. Machlekes Rab Shimon v'Rabbanan, the masnisen of our Mishnah, ihava avoda eloi. If a halach is avoda, Rab Shimon, according to Rab Shimon, where halach is not a avoda, have avoda, and therefore it shouldn't pass. The Katani masnisen Rab Shimon machshir behiluch. Rab Shimon held that even a bad machshava by hiluch is kosher, or won't pass the carbon. Why? Delay passal ba machshava by lacha, or delay passal ba machshava. Rab Shimon holds that even if you had a machshava of psul, like a shaloi l'shema, or a pigel during the halacha, it won't pass because halacha is not really an avodah that's always required. So by lacha shaloi beregel klamar. So now it's telling us a whole new pshat in the Mishnah. We thought that Rab Shimon, who's machshir, if you had a machshava psula, is even by a regular halacha, because he doesn't consider a regular halacha to be halacha. Now the Gemara suggests, no, that's not pshat in Rab Shimon. The way we've been learning Rab Shimon until now is all wrong. The Mishnah is speaking in a very specific case. The Mishnah is speaking when the halacha was done shaloi beregel. And davka by a halacha shaloi beregel, Rab Shimon does not consider it to be a halacha. It's by halacha shaloi beregel kalmar, umishum delaf halachi. So now we're having a new pshat in the Mishnah. We have a machlokes between Rab Shimon and the Chachamim. If a machshava psula during the halacha will passel, that's not by a regular halacha. By a regular halacha, Avoda would passel. The machlokes is if you did this inadequate type of halacha. Rab Shimon knows this is not even considered a halacha. So a machshava during what we don't even consider a halacha surely wouldn't pass. So that's what the Gemara wants to suggest now. So let's see the Gemara inside. By lacha rabasi, if it was a long trip from where the shechita was to the mizbeach, where it absolutely needed a kohen to actually walk, meaning there's for sure a halacha beregel, kula alma loy pligi de psula. There, everybody would hold, even if Shimon would agree that a bad machshava during a real halacha where the kohen has to walk across the hazara, that will surely pass. Keep pligi, maybe our Mishnah that suggests that there is a machlokes where Rab Shimon held that a machshava psula will not pass a halacha. That's if the whole halacha is not a good halacha. Well, halacha is the trosi. Only if it's what we call a mini halacha, a mini halacha, that doesn't really qualify as a halacha according to Rab Shimon, because it was a halacha shaloi beregel, and therefore a bad machshava during a not halacha, a non halacha wouldn't pass. Zok to Gemara mechaku Allah b'marava. That is correct. That's going to come up later. It's a very good point. If it's not halacha, so where does it fit in? Right. So we're going to see that too. So Zok to Gemara mechaku Allah b'marava. They laughed at this suggestion in marava. And one of the questions that was asked is, how could you say such a pshat? And the Gemara is going to ask, I think, exactly what you just pointed out. We would all agree that a machshava of shaloi l'shma would passel a chata sa'oif. Now, by the chata sa'oif, the way the zerika is done is you're not mekabel the dam from the neck of the bird into a keli, and then you make a standard zerika. You would just squeeze the body of the bird, and that would squeeze out the blood, and that would create a little projectile that would throw the blood onto the mizbeach. So there never really is a proper halacha. So the Rab Shimon heichim ishkachasla. How would you ever have a Pasal machshava by the zrika sadam of a chatas oif. Either chashavala mekamed alei dam. If the dam has not yet left the bird, you're squeezing the bird so that the blood should squirt out, but there's still no blood yet. It's at that nanosecond before the blood squirts out. If that's when you want to suggest that the psul should happen, lav klumhi. According to you, Rab Shimon holds that a halacha is a trussi, which this would be. You're starting to move the blood, but it hasn't moved yet. Well, lav klumhi. According to Rab Shimon, that's not a halacha at all. You didn't walk with it. There was no halacha beregel, so that couldn't have passed. The basar the nafak dam, and now if the dam is already out of the neck of the bird, and now it's airborne, and it's in a projectile that's flying through the air, about to hit the mizbeach, well, the zrich is done. The moment the dam leaves the body of the bird, your action is done. Your koyach that you're putting into this avoda is done. Yes, it might take a little moment until it hits the target, but your action of zrika, whatever you needed to do to make that happen, occurred already. Is avida le mitzvasai. So where would there be a moment where a bad machshava could be chal? While you're squeezing before it goes, that's hilach shloy beregel. That's nothing at all. And afterward, you did the mitzvah already. So exactly where was there a avoda here that could have been done? The psul. And Rashi articulates this very, very beautifully. Elachata sa'oif. The kaimalon beper kotche kotchem. The posal bo machshava ba'azah astama shehu ikra v'dasa. A bad machshava of shaloi l'shma would passel the carbon. Exactly when did you have this machshava? Now, how do you know it passel the carbon? And the way it's done is you squeeze the body of the bird, and that causes the dam to squirt out of it. And that causes the blood to squirt out, and then the projectile will hit the wall of the mizbeach. The hachataza halacha is a trussi. This hataza, when you're transporting the dam to the mizbeach, is halacha is a trussi because you didn't take a step. The chiv in the time of the Reb Shimon, mishum the halacha is a trussi le'pasal b'machshava, and since Reb Shimon holds that a mini halacha is not considered a halacha, and therefore a machshava can't passel, exactly how did a machshava psula during this activity? How could it have possibly passed? If while you squeeze it, that's what you're referring to as the avoda that a machshava psula can destroy, that won't work because ha'amet lav klumi. You, Reb Shimon, said that such a halacha is not a halacha at all. The halacha is a trussi. And if once the dam was airborne, is when you had the machshava of shalom shema, and that's when the zrika is happening. V'nita is b'netzaver pashuv. It's too late. You did the job already. Only now at this point in the Gemara thinks that the avodah is over once you did your job, even though the kinetic activity did not complete and the dam is still in transit. Mechinovak dam. Once the dam left your hand, you've put your koyach into it. Gomra law avodas hazosa. That's over. The avagav lemota dam lemizbeach. Even though the dam has not yet hit the mizbeach, your zrika is over. So there is no moment in which a bad machshava could possibly impact this carbon. If you're going to tell me that where did Reb Shimon say that it's not considered a halacha? Even a real halacha walking, Reb Shimon doesn't consider that a halacha. Why? The time of Reb Shimon, mishum de efsher levatla. Who? What's Reb Shimon's reasoning? It's a halacha is never an avoda that a bad machshava can impact because halacha is not an avoda that's absolutely necessary. If that's Reb Shimon's reasoning, which is how we always understood until a couple of minutes ago, then hadachatos. The halacha of the chatos doesn't have that problem. Every other carbon, you might have a problem that you don't need the halacha because you could have technically shechted it right near the mizbeach. But with the chatos, you don't have that. You need this activity here. But if you want to go with this new pshat that Reb Shimon says that our mission is only talking about a halacha without walking, And that halacha is what Reb Shimon doesn't consider to be halacha. Uv'shaloi beregel plea, and the discussion is this type of halacha, where no one took a step. Well, if that's the case, hachi hechi pasla bahach. How could it have passed by a chatas hoy? Haloi ein kan machshava ela b'halacha shaloi beregel. The only moment where he could have had a machshava while he was doing something was by this halacha where he wasn't walking. And according to Reb Shimon, that should have no impact on the korban at all. Well, okay, let's stop here on that. Okay, so Zok to Gemara, that is why what we quoted, that this machloikas is totally in the machloikas, Reb Shimon and the Rabbanon, is a chukah. It's a joke, because according to that, you would never be able to have a machshava psula that will passel during the zrikas adam of the chatas. Zog to Gemara, I don't understand what the problem is. My kusha, Dilma, me the mafresh. What's the washing? Me the porish dam. Sorry, me the porish dam. The ad the motalim is beach. Maybe while the dam is airborne, yes, you've done your full activity. You've already discharged the dam. It's on its way to hitting the mizbeach, but that doesn't mean the avoid is over. The avoid is very much in the middle, and therefore your machshava while the dam is airborne, while the dam is a projectile, that machshava psula will pass it. How do I know that the avoida isn't over from your perspective once you've done your job, and the avoida is not over until the full zrika is completed and the dam actually comes in contact with the mizbeach? I know it from another brisa. Zog to Gemara, the Haboy Minei, Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the following shaila of Rabbi Zera. Hayamasa, what if someone made a regular hazon? I'm not talking about a bird over here. I'm talking about a regular hazon. He took his finger with dam and he gave it a throw, and the dam is now airborne. So again, whatever he had to put into it, he's already injected his koich into it. And then before the dam hit the mizbeach, while the dam was airborne, Rachmanu Islan, v'nikta hayodoi shel mazer ad shelo higia dam lavir hamizbeach. Somehow the kohen's hand was cut off. So the question is, was the avodah completed by a balmum or no? The avodah was completed before it became a balmum. Mao. The Omerle, you know what Rabbi Yirmiyah answered? It's not a brisa, it's Rabbi Yirmiyah. Psula. It's possible. You know why it's possible? Because vehiza v'nosan be'inon. The avodah of the zrika has not been completed until not only vehiza, you did your share, but v'nosan, your action was completed and the dam actually hit the mizbeach. So if that's the case, if the kohen becoming a balmum while the dam is airborne, if that will passel the avodah, because that means the avodah was completed by a balmum, who did a machshava psula that occurs while the dam is airborne is also considered to have occurred during the avodah, and it will pass. So therefore, that can't be the reason why they laughed at Rabbi Yochanan in my Rava. They laughed at who said the machloek is totally Rabbi Shimon and the Rabbanon. It doesn't say who was talking over there, but that can't be why they laughed, because it's very logical. So now we need to know why they laughed at this suggestion in Marava. So I'm going to tell you why this is a joke, why you cannot say that this is pshat in the machloikus of Shimon and the Rabbanon. Are you telling me that Reb Shimon does not argue on the Rabbanon if you made a proper halacha? Right? Because we assume that the whole svar of Reb Shimon is, since a halacha is not always required, therefore any psul that occurs during a halacha wouldn't be a problem. Now we want to say that's not what Reb Shimon is saying. Reb Shimon is saying is if the halacha was not done properly because the kohen didn't take any steps, that's not a halacha. But by a regular halacha, Reb Shimon holds a machshava would passel. You cannot say that that's what Reb Shimon says. You know why? We know for sure that Reb Shimon is arguing by halacha rabasi. You know how I know? Because Reb Shimon says so beferish. The reason why the halacha wouldn't passel is it's possible to do an avodah without a halacha. that applies even to a full-blown halacha. So you simply don't have proper pshat in your Shimon. Ella b'halacha, and that's why it's a chuk. That's why the whole pshat was a joke, because you're learning a pshat in Reb Shimon that's not consistent with what he himself said. He said, "I don't consider any halacha a real avoda because any halacha you could have done without." Ella b'halacha zukrasi kula amaloi pligi. Everybody owes that by halacha zukrasi, by a mini halacha, meaning where you didn't take a step. Everybody argues the posla. I'm sorry. Kulam aloy pligi the posla. Everybody agrees that it would posla. Now I just changed the girsa because the girsa says the loy posla. But Rashi says kulam aloy pligi the posla. Everybody agreed that it would be posla. It wouldn't be a proper halacha. He pligi the halacha rabasi. The machlokes between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim is in the full-blown halacha. Do we consider that an avoda that a machshava psul apostle or not? Vivalt, you don't necessarily have to do halacha in every carbon because you could have shechted near the mizbeach. Let's see Rashi, because I'm not going to so boldly change the girsa and blame it on Rashi unless I could show it to you. Ella by lachas the Rashi kulam pligi the posla. So you see Rashi takes out the word loy. The apostle like I see in Rashi, no, I'm consciously telling you, take out that loy. The taima, the reasoning would be mishum the efsher levatel, because you can't be mevatel such a halacha. For instance, by the halacha of the chatos, you have to transport the dam in this way. That's the only way you can do it, by squeezing the animal, and that squeezes the blood out. Uman the Garis to Leipostl, Rashi wants to offer a pshat of Leipostl. But whatever the case is, the portion of pshat Rashi's learning is the Postla. So the Postla, because that's the only way to do it. He pligi by Lacha Rabasi. The Machlek is it by Lacha Rabasi, where it wasn't necessary. A regular Lacha of Shimon holds will never possible because the whole Avoda of Lacha doesn't necessarily have to be done. Dr. Marvati. What about the following case? Halichu zar. A zar did the halach. Now, that's not a kosher halach. It has to be done through a kohen. V'chsiroi, and you did a do-over. V'chsiroi kohen, and the kohen took the blood back from where the zar brought it to, back to its original position. V'chazer v'alichoi, and did it again. So here, when the last time we had the discussion was by a halacha zetrosi, when a zar moved it but not moving his feet, and the question there was, can you do a do-over or not? And the Gemara seemed to have concluded that a do-over would be allowed. Now we want to know, what if the zar did a proper halacha? He actually walked across the zar with it. Can you do a do-over, or will it permanently pass? Halichi zar v'chsir kohen v'chazer v'alichu pligi ba. The children of Reb Chia had a machlokes with Reb Yanai as to whether or not this is a fixable issue. Chadam or kosher, it's fixable. The chadam or posel. Ma'asavar efshel l'tekuna. One man beholds, even though the halacha was originally done wrongfully through a zar, it could be fixed, it could be redone. Ma'asavar loy efshel l'tekuna, it cannot be redone. Okay, now let's just stop for a moment. Because why would it make a difference who took it back? Halichu zar. If you need to do over again, so anybody could bring back the dam to where it started from. But if you notice, the Gemara says dafka hechsiru koyin. The koyin has to bring it back. Why? Why can the zar bring it back? The most important thing is that the new halacha is done properly. So there's actually a shaila in the Rishonim if it actually has to be v'chsiru koyin, or if it would even be the same shaila if the zar was the one who brought it back to its original position. The question is efshel eskoina or not. Let's have a quick peek at Rashi to see the svar. It was the kohen's responsibility to do the halacha. The chaz of elicha kosher. V'ad tanya le'il zar v'aynon v'halacha pasol is kishalei hochsera. If you didn't do a do-over. So the question is, efshel sakuna lo'ilachas pasol. Can you redo hilachas pasol? Now, Shloimi asked yesterday, what is a dichli? Once the carbon is niktra, once an avoda was done that was not appropriate, it's possible. You don't revive karbanis. So Rashi says that would not apply to this halacha. Well, where if it's done puzzle, you can't fix it. Because in Ushchita, the Kabbalah, Uzrika, you cannot do a do-over on these things. It's too late already. You can't shecht it again. Why can't you do Kabbalah again? Kabbalah nami yesh l'sakin. How? To go into the kibul apostle kol adam. Yeah, what if a apostle person did some Kabbalah, but there's still dam draining out of the neck of the animal? So you could still salvage it. V'yochel kosher lachser l'kabel. Zok Rashi hahivad ekshera. That's not even the shalah fixing, because all that has to happen is some dam has to be niskabel. So you didn't capture the first bit of blood, you captured the second bit of blood. That's not even called a psul. That's even better than our case. By our case, a hilacha was done wrongfully, the dam was repositioned. Here, you didn't do it yet, but you didn't do anything that was possible to korban yet either. It would perak shlishi to non-law. Im yesh dam nefesh yachshar kosher v'yikabel. If there's still dam nefesh coming out, the kabbalah can still be done. We haven't lost our opportunity. If there's still blood left over, but if the halacha was done through a puzzle, can you call for a do-over? So we have a machlokes if it's efshel koina or not. But what about the opposite case? A kohen did a halacha, v'chazar v'halicha zar. Then the zar put the dam back in its original position, and now he made the halacha. Will his halacha? Do you look at the last halacha that was done? That's the one that counts. And here it was done by a zar. Or do you say no? Once the halacha is done by a kosher kohen, that's it. That avoid is discharged. Now you're ready for the next, and we don't care that a zar might have relocated it again. So Amar Absimi Barashi LeDivrei HaMachshir Posel Livrei HaPosel Machshir. If you hold that the last avoided that was done is what counts, so if the zar did it, the kohen could redo it. Well, then if you flip it over and the kohen did it first and then the zar does it, it should be posel, because you clearly look at the last time this dam actually got delivered to the mizbeach. Was it delivered by a kosher or by a posel? However, l'divrei posel machshir. But if you hold that if the zar did it, the kohen can't do it over because you only look at the first time that halacha was made. So then, if the kohen made the halacha first, then the zar doing it later can't mess it up. So it would these two shilas would be inversely connected. I'm sorry. Oh, so that's what Rav says. Rav Amar not necessarily. Af l'divrei posel. Even if you held that if the kohen did it, it passes. Even if the kohen did it after the zar, he can't fix it. You could still claim that if the zar did it after the kohen, it will pass. So I feel different partial could still be possible, which is exactly your argument. My timer, because yes, we'll say that the avoda that was done originally passes, but the fact of the matter is, even if the kohen did it originally and the zar does it again, at the end of the day, my timer. The tzarech lam tuya. If the kohen did it and then the position of the dam was put back into its original position, you can't say the halacha is discharged because you still practically need to get the blood from point A to point B, and that has to be completed by a kohen. My time the tzarech lam tuya, it still has to be delivered, and it's not being delivered, as Rashi says. Tzarech lam tuya the ka'amet lachshuva avoda mehai tam machloikus Rabbi Lezer v'Rabbanon b'masnisen. That the fact is that this is a avodah that needs to be done, and if it's an avodah, it will pass. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah Rav Ashi. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rav Ashi, Hachi Amar Rav Yirmiyah Midifti. This is what Rav Yirmiyah Midifti said, that Ha Tzarech Lam Tuya, this svara that we just raised, that Lamaisa, the dam does have to get close to the Mizbeach, and it has to get close to the Mizbeach through a kohen, and therefore you can't say since the kohen did it once, and if the zor did a do-over, that won't have an impact. It will have an impact. As Dovi says, you got to get the dam over there, and the dam's got to get over there through the action of a kohen. This, whether or not that's a valid taina, is actually machlokes Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabban. It's totally the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer. I believe the Bach changed it to Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbanon, and we're going to see in a moment which machlokes that Rabbi Yirmiyah is referencing. Remember, it seems in our Mishnah that there were three shittas. The Tanakama said that halacha is a regular avoda. V'yada machshava psula, it's going to passel the avoda. Rabbi Shimon said, no, never ever do we consider a halacha a required avoda, because in many cases there's actually no halacha required at all. And then Rabbi Eliezer seemed to have introduced a new shita, and Rabbi Eliezer says, depends. If it was needed, it's going to be an avoda. If it wasn't needed, it's not going to be an avoda. That's what Rabbi Eliezer said in the Mishnah. So the question is Rabbi Eliezer a third shita coming up the middle, or maybe he is just clarifying the shita of Rabbi Shimon? So what did Rabbi Eliezer say in the Mishnah? If you needed, because the shechita was far away from the mizbeach, so a proper halacha was required in this particular instance, machshava poiselis. But mokum she'ein tzorich lahalech, ein machshava poiselis. V'yomar Rava, and Rava commented on this halacha in our Mishnah of Rabbi Elazar, and he said the following: Hakol moedim, everybody would agree that kiblu b'chutz v'chnisoi b'fnim zehu hiluch shetzorich lahalech. If the Kabbalah Dam was made far away from the Mizbeach and someone had to bring the Dam closer to the Mizbeach, that is definitely a halacha that was required, and surely the Machshava would passel by such a halacha. But Kiblai Bifnim V'Atilachut, what if the Kabbalah Dam was made right by the Mizbeach and someone took the Dam and walked away from the Mizbeach? That is surely a halacha that was not required. Zehu Hiluch She'ein Tzorich Lahalech. That would be a halacha that wasn't required, which, by the way, when we learn the Mishnah, Rashi says, you know when you'll find out what a hiluch shein tzorich is? You'll find out at the end, which we just found out. That means if you took the dam in the wrong direction, there is no machlokes. Even everybody agrees, even Rabbi Elazar agrees that this is not a halacha. Lo nachluku. You know where we do have a machlokes here? Elo kishechnisai v'chazar v'otziyah. Exactly our case, where there was a proper halacha made because the dam was brought from a place that's far away from the mizbeach to the mizbeach, and then someone brought it back. I'm sorry. Well, and there's a whole bunch of briskers watching that would have should have told them what way to go. Right? They're all excited to tell the kohen where to go. Right? So loy nachlagu elakeshech nizoy v'chazer v'otziyah. Mar Savar, one mandamar holds, Hatzarech le'amtuya, the dam does need to be brought, and therefore it would be possible. That's what the Rabbanon would hold. That's what the Tanakh would hold. That the fact is, we needed to get the dam back near the Mizbeach. That's considered still a halacha. Umar Savar and Rabbi Elazar would argue under Rabbanon and would say, Lav kehiluch hatzarech la'avodah. We don't consider this a valid avodah. Why? Because the original halacha was already done. And the fact that we technically just need to relocate this dam to get it to the Mizbeach, that won't make this activity into a halacha. The halacha was already discharged properly. So that's exactly what our shaila is. So let's suggest that the machlokes that we're discussing here, if tzarech lamtuya, if having to get the dam back to the Mizbeach, even though the halacha was done already, does that automatically make it into a valid halacha? That is the machlokes between Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan in our Mishnah. Zok to Gemara, that's not true. Esvei Abaye. Abaye had a kasha on this comment that Rava made, and Rava wanted to say that this shaila is totally the machlokes Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan. Abaye said it's not true, because I'm going to quote for you another brisa that quotes Rabbi Elazar. And look at how the brisa quotes Rabbi Elazar. What is a mokum shetzarech lahalech? That is kiblu b'chutz v'chnis lefnim. That is the only time it's a real halacha. Zeu hiluch shetzarech lahalech. However, kiblu b'fnim. But what if the Kabbalah was right near the mizbeach v'aytzir lechutz, and the halacha, what we tried to do is halacha went away from the mizbeach, and there he had a bad machshava? That's not called that wouldn't be called halacha. But it's mashma, the only type of a halacha that we don't count is a halacha that's taking it away from the mizbeach. But once it was taken away from the mizbeach, bringing it back, that would be a halacha that a machshav would passel. Meaning, even Rabbi Eliezer agrees that this is a problem. So Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan both agree that hatzarech lam tuyeh is an issue, and therefore it would passel. Everybody agrees to that. Reb Shimon holds a halacha, no matter what, is never considered an avoda, because sometimes it's not required. And there's only a two-way machlokes. And Rabbi Eliezer just explaining the sheet of the Rabbana. Amalei, so Rabbi said, "Nu itanya tanya." If you have a brisa that says quite clearly that I'm wrong, and says that Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan in our Mishnah both agree that the fact that the halacha was done is irrelevant. If now the dam is found far away from the mizbeach and it needs to be brought to the mizbeach, that will also be considered a halacha, and the machshava psula would passel that. And Shimon says, no matter what, the halacha will never passel because a halacha isn't an activity, it's not an avodah that's always required. Baruch Hashem, we were zoicha to finish the first parak of Zevachim. B'li neder hadin alach kol hazvachim, b'li neder hadin alach kol hazvachim, b'li neder hadin alach kol hazvachim. Now we're going to be zoicha to start the next parak. Kol hazvachim, all hazvachim, and I'm going to jump into the gimel. The base, I mean, kol hazvachim shekibel daman, not shekiblu, but shekibel daman, that the kabbalas hadam, which is a very integral avodah, if it was done through a zor, someone who's not a proper kohen, like a Yisrael, and oinain, even if it's done through a kohen, but it's a kohen who lost one of his close relatives that day, or it's full yoim, somebody who was tummy, and he toiveled already, but he has to wait till the evening until his full tahira gets triggered, or a mechutza kippurim. Rashi says, what is a mechutza kippurim? Kohen gadol sheshimeis bepachas mishayna yishmayna. The kohen hedged bepachas medalot. If he was a mechutza begodim, I'm sorry. Rashi switches it around. The mechutza kippurim is zavu mitzayra shetavlu, the hair of Shimshon, a zav and a mitzayra who were toiveled, and it's nightfall already, but they still have to bring karbonos as the final step to discharge their tumah, the leviu kaparosim. So that's a mechutza kippurim. Mechutza begodim is a kohen who wasn't wearing his proper uniform, or shaloi rachatz yadayim v'raglayim. We know before any kohen does an avodah, he has to go to the kiyar and wash his hands and feet. Or oral, or if the kohen did not get a bris, now how could of course we didn't have a bris. Rashi, no, he legally didn't have to get a bris because he already had brothers prior to him receive a bris, and they died from it. So it was determined that it would be dangerous to the life of the kohen, so he didn't get a bris. But he's still an oral, he's still not allowed to do that. Avodah. Tameh, if it's a kohen who's tameh, Yosy, if he's sitting while he's doing the avodah, that will passel. Or he's standing, but there's a chatzitza between his feet and the ground of the azara. The halach is the kohen's feet have to be touching the floor of the azara. If he's standing on something, then there's that hefsek. Or al gabe behema, or if he's sitting on top of a behema, again he's not touching the floor. Or even al gabe ragle chaveroi, he's standing on his friend's feet aren't touching the ground. Puzzle. I'm sorry? Correct. Kibel b'smoil. What if he did the Kabbalah with his left hand rather than his right hand? Puzzle. And Reb Shimon machshir. So the Gemara now is going to go through in detail the Mekar for all of these halachos. Zar bin Allah. How do you know that if a Zar does an avodah, the avodah is psula? That's why we're talking about Kabbalah, not Shechita, because we know Shechita is Kshera. The Tani Levi quoted a brisa. It says in the pasuk, Daber. I like looking at the full pasuk inside first. So the Torah or Hashalom actually brings a series of psukim. Daber el Aharin vel Banov the Nazru Mikache b'nei Yisrael. Now this is talking about a kohen that's told me he's not allowed to do the avodah. It's not talking about a zar. So we're going to have to see how we extract the psul of a zar from this pasuk. But it says the Nazru, they should remove themselves. They should stay away. They should separate themselves. As a Nazir separates himself, Mikache b'nei Yisrael v'lo yechalalu Hashem kachi. They should not be mechal my shame. Asher he makdishim li'anei Hashem. Nowhere in this pasuk there's a mention that we're talking about tumah, but the next pasuk clarifies it. Emor aleinu dar yisechem kalisha asher yikrav mikol zarachem elakachim asher yakdishu b'nei Yisrael Hashem v'tum osay alav. If a kohen is tummy and he approaches the avodah, v'nichris ha'nefeshi milafana ani Hashem. So these two psukim at first glance seem to be referring to a kohen that's tummy. We are looking for a makar that a zor is prohibited from doing the avodah. So it says, Daber el ahar v'avoda v'yinazru mikachim b'nei Yisrael. B'nei Yisrael mutimai. Why did it say v'yinazru, not the malkachim? You only have to stay away from the kachim of b'nei Yisrael. Why didn't it say v'yinazru mikachim? They should stay away from all kachim. It's mashma that there's only a certain type of kachim that a kohen is tamei has to separate himself from. But there might be some type of kachim that even if the kohen is tamei, he could come into contact with. So the mutimai, ilema the mutinashim. If you're going to tell me that if it's not b'nei Yisrael, if it's b'nei Yisrael that brought a carbon, such a carbon a kohen could serve while he's tamei, are you going to suggest that carbon nashim? The tumah karv. Are you going to suggest that the carbon that a woman brings, you could bring betuma, bitmiyah, the chiyesh kayach b'carbon nashim litchais atuma? What is there some type of kayach that the carbon of a woman has to repel tumah? Of course not. So maybe it means if the carbon was brought by a guy, there the kohen could do when he's tummy. Dafka b'nei Yisrael, not guy. That's not mistaber either. Because we know that if avoda was done by mistake, but we didn't know about it, it's going to be a kosher avoda because the tzitz was meratze on avoda that was done betuma that was unknown. But that tzitz meratze, that magic doesn't work for the carbon of a goy. Hash the tzitz loy meratze by a goy. The Yomar Mar uvaivdik echavin bein b'shagil bein bebezid loy hurtza by a goy. If the avoda was done betuma, it will be possible because he doesn't have the benefit of the tzitz cleaning everything up. So betuma karv, you're going to suggest l'chatchila we're saying a kohen could be tamei when he's working on the carbon of a goy when we know it won't be meratze. El hachi kamer. You know what the pasuk must be saying? The yinazru mikache, big fat comma, and then b'nei Yisrael v'lo yechalu. The b'nei Yisrael is not allowed to do avoda because they will be mechal. So that's how the Gemara is suggesting we read a pasuk. Daber l'ayin v'albanav v'yinazru mikache, and they should stay away from all kachim if they're tamei. And now another halacha, b'nei Yisrael v'lo yechalu. A Yisrael shouldn't do an avoda because he will be mechal avoda. That is the makar of how we know that a non-kohen may not do the avoda. The Rabbi Shmuel Tana. The Rabbi Shmuel says I can learn it out of a different place. Also b'kavul chaymer mibalmum. I could make a kavul chaymer from a balmum, a kohen balmum. Ma balmum sha'oichel im ovet chilel. Ma decha balmum kohen. Who could eat kachim? He could eat basar of the chatas. A Yisrael could never eat the basar of the chatas, but a balmum could. Nevertheless, if he did the avoda, it would be mechal the avoda, and we'll have to have psukim for that. So Rashi, the pasuk is, it says mumboy v'lo yechalas maktasha. So we know the pasuk is beferish about mum can't do the avoda, yet we know he could eat from kachim. Zor she'eino yochel. A Yisrael is never allowed to eat the carbon of the chatas. Eino din shem avat chilel. Surely, if he did the avoda, he's even worse than a kohen who's a balmum. Surely, if he did the avoda, it should be possible. The Zok Gemara, that's not a good kavachaymer. Mala balmum shekein also be karv kamakrim. The mum is such a problematic psul that not only if the kohen was a balmum is it possible, if the behemoth was a balmum it would be possible. But there's no such thing as a behemoth being a zor, right? You can't have an animal that's a kohen and an animal that's a Yisrael unless you want to say a good joke, right? This is up to Gemara. Mala balmum shekein also by karv kamakrim. That's why the avoid is psula with a balmum. But by a zor, it won't be a problem. Zaktamar no, because Tamei Yechiach. We know a kohen who is Tamei can't do the avoda, and you don't have that psul by the animal either. Zaktamara Mala Tamei Shekein Mitama. Tamei is a different chumrah that it's a psul that could spread to another thing. Zaris can't spread. You don't make someone into a zor by touching him, right? So therefore, from Tuma also, just because a Tama is possible to do the avoda, how would you see that a Zor can do the avoda? Balmum will show that even if you cannot spread this problem to another person like Tuma, it will still possible him from doing the avoda. Now you have a matzad. Tama is not like a balmum. And a balmum is not like Tama. What does a balmum and a Tama share? Shemuz harin. They're both told that they may not do the avodah. And Rashi quotes the pasuk: "Tamei is from v'yinazru, and the balmum is from lo yigash. Yet v'im avdu chilu. But if they did avodah wrongfully, it will passel the avodah. Af ani avi zar, so too will apply the same principle to a zar. Shu muzar, we know a zar is not allowed to do the avoda, but vim avad, if he did avoda, chilel, it would pass. So we know it from a matzad. Zak tomorrow minalan the musar. You're telling me, just like those two are not allowed to do the avoda, they're doing the avoda will passel. So too a Yisrael, who we know from some other source that he may not do the avoda. If he does the avoda will passel. Where's the source? How do you know that a zar cannot do the avoda? Minalan the musar. If it's from the pasuk that we said a moment ago, b'nei Yisrael v'lo yechalalu. Well, chilul bigu feiksiv. That pasuk tells you everything you need to know. It says v'lo yechalu. So clearly it says that if a zar did the avoda, it would passel the avoda. So we need to find a mikar where we will only know that he's not supposed to do the avoda, and then we could use this ma'atzad to tell us that if he does do the avoda, it will be possible. So where do we have such a pasuk? Ela mi vizor loy yikrav aleichem. There's a special pasuk that says the zar shouldn't do the avoda. Let's read the pasuk. It says in the pasuk, the nilvu alecha v'shamu es mishmeres oil moyed. It was talking about the function of the Levium. L'chal avodas oil v'zar lo yikrav aleichem. A zar shouldn't come close. That's where we know that lechatchila a zar is not allowed to do that avoda. And then using the mahatzad from a tamei and a balmum, we learned that if a yid does do the avoda, if a Yisrael does do the avoda, it will be possible. But it's still not a good mahatzad. Because ikal mifrach mala atar hashovish abhem saya balmum saya tamei shekein loy hutru bibama. A tamei and a balmum were not allowed to do the avoda even by the bombers. But a Yisrael was allowed to do avoda. He didn't need a kohen to do avoda on the bombers. So maybe a Yisrael's avoda will not pass. Zok Tamar, okay. So loy tema tamei yochiach. When we asked the kasha mal balmum, that there's a psul on the animal too, not just on the oived, the Gemara said tamei yochiach, because tamei is only a psul on the oived. Let's ignore tamei because we have a problem with the ma'atzad that it's lehutru b'bama. Aleima oinei yochiach. Now that the ma'atzad is from a balmum and a kohen who's an oinen. So therefore, there's no problem of oinin on the animal. So the whole kasha was by a balmum. It's a problem if the animal's a balmum, but there's no problem if the animal's an oinin. So oinin yichich. So kamar mala oinin shekenos of a meiser. The oinin has another chumrah, and the oinin may not eat meiser. A Yisrael's allowed to eat meiser. So kamar balmum yichich. For that you have a balmum yichich, because a balmum could also eat meiser. The chazar did not have a matzad. Loy roizeh karoizeh. A balmum is not like an oinin, and an oinin is not like a balmum. Hasar Shabbat Shabbahen, they do share the halacha. Shemus Harim, that they're both not allowed to do avoda, and if they do avoda, the avoda will be possible. So to a zar who does avoda, if he does it, it will be possible. Frank Gemara, Hakanami Lifreich, I can ask Akasha and Shlug of this matzad. Mal Atzad Shabbat Shabbahen, Oinen in a balmum, Shekain Loy Hutru B'Bama, and Oinen wasn't allowed to do avoda in the bama. And neither was the balmum. So the same kasha that we had when you put a balmum and a tummy together, we have that same problem with the oinain. So how do you know that a zar? How do you know that a zar would passel the avodah? Maskif law Rab Sama Berei Derava. Uman leimalom the oinain also bebam. Domashari bebam. You just dreamt up that an oinain may not do avoid in the bama. Maybe the oinain was allowed to do the avoid in the bama. Where do we know? Where are the psukim that tell us that an oinain cannot do the avoda? When we see that pasuk, we don't necessarily know that it applies to an oinain because it says lo yetze. It says by the kohen gadol, even though he's an oinain, min mikdash lo yetze, and we're medayik that a kohen head should be yetze, but that's only for the mikdash, not from a bama. So maybe in fact an oinain is allowed to do avoda on a bama. That was the kasha. That was the kasha that Rav Shama Berei Rav asked, and based on that, we can learn from a ma'atzad of oinain and the balmum that a Yisrael who did avoda will be psula. Okay, let's stop here, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. I'm trying to get a little bit ahead because I'm not going to be on Yom Kippur, so at least now we're a quarter of a blot ahead. We'll stop here, Bez Hashem. We will continue tomorrow.